the Pilgrims. So had I spoken with them everycon, that I was of here fellowship anon, and made forward early for to rise, to take our way, there as I yow devise. Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales. Many roads lead to Compostela, and each year many pilgrims travel it. Some travel alone, braving thieves and whatever else might wait in the night, to keep their solitude and reflect on their sins. Some travel in groups from a small village, bands of friends or relations, making the trip together, reinforcing their faith with the solidarity of companionship. And some pilgrims simply meet on the road and travel together out of fear, out of comfort, or out of simple boredom. In the year of our Lord 1230, in the first part of the month of April, on the silver road to Compostela that winds through Portugal, and is commonly travelled by pilgrims from the south of Iberia and other, more distant lands, such a fellowship came together. Why the 7 of them chose to travel in that year, only God himself knows, but surely God has his reasons. The 7 were a varied lot. One was a Dominican friar, a man not yet old, but whose calling and harsh work granted him the appearance of an older man. Thin and long of limb and feature, his cowl concealed a shock of stark white hair. He was called Giordano Nicola da Senta, although the others merely called him brother or friar. Another was a man called Alejandro, and he never said what land he hailed from, although others suspected him to be Aragonese. His girth and clothes showed him to be prosperous, and his greying hair and manner of speech marked him as a man to heed, should he choose to speak. He rarely did, however, and when he spoke his voice conveyed sadness and resignation. 2 Englishmen made the journey, though they confessed they had only just met on the ship from that isle. One was a man called John of Bellingham, a man of a mere 21 years who had been to the Holy Land as a crusader. His sword and armour betrayed that, although he came from nobility, his family was not rich, but he wore his accoutrements with pride, tarnished though they were, and sat on his lean horse with the bearing of a true knight. When he rode, however, one could see him wince with pain. A wound in his right side had sent him home from the crusade. The second traveller from Britain was also a noble, but one of much more prosperous fortunes. He was called Richard of Southampton Glen, and he travelled with 2 strong and loyal wolfhounds who followed ever at his heels. He was easily the most confident of the men on the pilgrimage, and he watched the others as though looking for their true reasons for making this journey, though he did not state his own. But not all of the pilgrims were lettered men or lords. A cordwainer, hands roughened and fingers nicked by years of his work, rode with them. His leather hood and fine clothing attested to the quality of his work, but his voice was coarse and brusque. His name was Aldous, and he had made a great show of purchasing wine when the pilgrims stopped at an inn on the road. A student joined the pilgrims late in the journey, but he was not the last. He was called Vidal, and he studied at the recently founded university at Salamanca, but hailed originally from Catalonia. He was so thin, the cordwainer ascertained, that a harsh breeze might send him sprawling, and his student's robes had been stitched together by a hand unsuited for such work. He had a fair complexion, but a haunted look wore at him, and he looked over his shoulder often. The very last to join the pilgrimage did so when the pilgrims were but 2 days from their destination. He was the least remarkable of the group. He did not dress in finery, but neither were his travelling clothes torn or much soiled. He carried no food with him, and ate when the others offered, but never seemed hungry. He wore no cross or crucifix, and when the others prayed at night, he went off alone to say his Aves alone. His name was Christophe, and he watched the others carefully and listened to their conversations, rarely saying a word. This was the assemblage. 7 men, their mounts, and 2 wolfhounds. The pilgrimage made their way through the paths and over the earth and stones towards the shrine of St. James, and on that pilgrimage they spoke but little together. Lord Richard and Sir John would talk frequently, but they spoke in the strange tongue of their homeland, and none of the others understood. Alejandro and Vidal conversed occasionally in Latin, but if any of the others comprehended their dialogues, he did not endeavour to join them. The 7 pilgrims were glad for each other's company, but did not take pleasure in it, did not share their reasons for the pilgrimage or much of themselves, until the night before they were to reach their destination. The fire blazed high that night, for the air was cold and a strange tension rode the breeze. The men huddled around the fire, ate what food they had or could find, and drank wine that Aldous provided. Vidal looked over his shoulder, then looked around at his fellows and spoke in French, asking if the others understood. Each of them nodded, some a bit more slowly than others, but it seemed as though they had found a common tongue. "Well then," Vidal continued, "I have a story I should like to tell. I warn you that it is not a tale for all audiences, and not one I would tell by light of day, and yet I feel it must be heard. It is a true story, you see, and one that happened to a friend of mine, a fellow student at Salamanca. Doubtless each of you has heard stories of demons and other creatures from friends or doting parents, and perhaps you believe them in your youth. I am a student, and I have read of such oddities as to make those stories seem base and bland, and yet something in those tales stirs us still. Am I wrong?" Not a head shook. The other men listened, and each of them understood. "Good. Then let me tell you a story."